This is the Almost Timely newsletter for the week of August 18th, 2024. Content authenticity statement. About 90% of this week's newsletter was generated by me, the human. You will see AI outputs in the opening section and a bunch of screenshots and stuff, so be on the lookout for that. All right, what's on my mind this week? You can't reasonably measure AI brand strength. Be very, very cautious of AI search tools. These are the tools that say, like, hey, man, measure how strong your brand is in generative AI. Not that it's a bad idea to think about how your brand is positioned within large language models like GPT-4o or Claude or Gemini, but because it's a nearly impossible task to make that determination in a cost-effective reasonable amount of time. Today's newsletter is going to be very technical. So here's the TLDR. If you don't want to sit through it, here it is. Using AI optimization tools to determine your AI SEO or I've heard so many variations, generative AI optimization or whatever, is a bit of a fool's errand because AI models don't work like search engines do. If you want to influence them, the best thing you can do is publish very high volumes of very high quality content. In other words, traditional SEO. The main difference is that instead of links as the gold standard of measurement, it's appearances on the public web. So that's it. Go home. See you next week. All right. Now, if you would like to stick around for the detailed explanation, grab your libation of choice, find a comfortable position. Let's dig into the weeds. Part 1, how AI models work. To learn why trying to measure our findability in AI models, this is a bit of a fool's errand. We first need to know how these things work. As a reminder, a model is the engine of today's generative AI tools. Services like ChatGPT are kind of like the car, and they use models like GPT-4 Omni as the engine under the hood. When these models are built by deep-pocketed technology companies, they are trained on massive amounts of data, 7 to 10 petabytes of data, mostly extracted from the public web. To give you a rough sense of how much text that is, all of William Shakespeare's plays, 837,000 words. This is 5.4 megabytes of text, give or take. 7 petabytes is 1.3 billion copies of this. 1.3 billion copies. This is about 3 inches tall, 7 centimeters or so. 7 petabytes is a stack of these, stacked vertically, like on a shelf. It's a bookshelf that goes around the world twice at the equator. Goes around the world twice. That's 7 petabytes of text. No graphics, no images, no video. That's just text. That's how much data a language model is trained on. Bookshelf that goes around the world twice. That's how much text you need to train today's models. It's also why only a few companies can make state-of-the-art foundation models like the ones that power ChatGPT, because it costs millions of dollars in time and hardware just to digest that amount of text. Now, the first part of the process is breaking down words into tokens, little 3 and 4 letter fragments of words. Then every token is turned into a number under the hood, behind the scenes when they're making these things. Then every token's position is compared to every other token's position in a massive statistical database. That's what's under the hood in every large language model. A big pile of statistics. It's one of the reasons why people will say, like, what's in an AI model is not the original. It isn't. It's a pile of numbers. If you open up that hood, you would not see your blog post or your book in there. You will see a big pile of numbers. The way I recommend people think about this conceptually is to think about word clouds. Right? You've seen word clouds. In any given piece of text, what's the word cloud for every word in that text? That's essentially what's going on conceptually. Mathematically, that is not. Mathematically, that's not true, but no one wants to read linear algebra in a newsletter, least of all me. I got like a C in calculus. I didn't even get to linear algebra. When we ask a model something using a prompt, the model breaks down our question into tokens, then goes into its massive statistical library and fetches all the essentially the word clouds, conceptually, it can find that match those tokens. For example, suppose you looked at all the word clouds on the internet around the term Starbucks. You would see words like coffee and tea and Wi-Fi and human and line and money and pay and all these things, right? All these words. You would see thousands and thousands of these words anchored to that word Starbucks. That is what's inside a language model. When we give a model a prompt, what comes back are the most related tokens, technically tokens, but words is fine conceptually, that the model maker's software has seen all over the internet. And this is why attempting to measure a brand's presence in a language model is a bit of a fool's errand. It is not like regular SEO, where you can see how entire web pages relate to each other through links. Instead, every part of every word is related to every part of every other word and phrase and sentence and paragraph and document inside these models. Massive statistical databases. Not at all like what we think of as SEO. Part 2, how people behave. The technical obstacles to measurement are tough enough to deal with, just the way tokens and models work. However, there's an additional wrinkle. In old school SEO, we pay attention to things like words. Right? You'll still see in most SEO teams and agencies things like keyword lists floating around and keyword planning tools. And those are fine when you're measuring links and checking the text of words in links as a way to determine what a page is about. All that goes out the window in generative AI because that's not how people use AI. It's not how they talk to AI. People don't type in things like Trust Insights Consulting or management consulting firm, right? You see those short queries in search. You don't see that in generative AI. You see people asking real questions and having real conversations like, hey, give me a list of recommended management consulting firms that specializes in healthcare in the Boston area, and who is Trust Insights and what do they do? Or what's a good recipe for guacamole for people who are allergic to citrus? Right? Those are conversations people have. There's a lot more words in them. Now you might think, oh, well, we can just ask common questions and measure how often we come up in the responses, right? That seems like a reasonable thing to do. If I ask, recommend a management consulting firms in Boston, I should be able to measure that, right? Going back to part 1, every word gets tokenized when we prompt a model. The more words, the more tokens, and the more specific and clear the response. That's why I always say it's okay for your prompts to be long and large and detailed, because the more tokens, the words you provide to a model, the better and more precise its responses will be. And the harder it is to predict what people themselves are going to type into an AI model. And the more likely it is that the model is going to return different results. Here's an example. Suppose I type in, who is Trust Insights and what do they do? I'll get a response from Google's Gemini that looks kind of like this. Right? Trust Insights is a marketing analytics consulting firm that specializes in helping businesses make better decisions with their data. They offer a range of services, blah, blah, blah. Right? That's good. That's right. That's correct. Now, suppose I type in the nearly identical question, what does Trust Insights do and who are they? Right? I started, my first question was, who is Trust Insights and what do they do? And I start a new chat and I say, what does Trust Insights do and who are they? Seems like the same question. It isn't. We understand semantically these are the exact same question, and we think we should get semantically the same basic answer. What do we get instead? Trust Insights is a marketing analyst consulting firm that helps companies use data to make better decisions and exceed their goals, et cetera, et cetera. A company was founded in 2017 by Katie Robert and Christopher S. Penn. Katie's the CEO. They're an IBM registered business partner. These are wildly different answers to the same question what we think is the same question. Both are factually correct, but you could not easily predict what the answers are going to be. If you're trying to measure even whether or not your brand is in an AI model, you can see how complicated this gets. It should be the same answer, but it's not. Why? Why does this happen? Remember that the way these models work, they take into account the order in which words appear when they're first trained. The order of words matters. In search engines and traditional search, word order matters very little because it's a much different, older, more primitive language technology, right? You'd say, Trust Insights Boston or Boston Trust Insights or whatever. because those tools are older, they treat that as pretty much the same thing. In language models, word order matters, and even seemingly unimportant words can trigger different token activations and lead to very different results. We call these things stop words, right? Recommend management consulting firms. Recommend some management consulting firms. We think of this as the same thing, and in older SEO, it would be the same thing. Not in generative AI. They're different. They're very different. Imagine now how problematic this becomes when an informational query like recommend some top consulting firms in the Boston area and recommend some Boston area top consulting firms yields totally different results. Different names, different vendors. Which one's right? Neither's wrong. They activate different tokens based on the word order. You get back different results. And one, you might say, hey, we're in AI. AI knows about us. It's recommending us. And the other is like, nope, we're not in here. Well, which one's right? They're both right. Good luck measuring your brand presence on every possible way of wording informational queries, which is what you would have to do to truly measure your brand strength in AI. Part 3, the cornucopia of models. So, the conversational nature of generative AI means it's very, very difficult to predict what an AI model will even say, much less measure our brand strength on it. Let me add an even bigger wrinkle. There are many, many more models in generative AI than there are in traditional search. In traditional search, you mainly have to worry about Google, right? You mainly have to worry about ranking well in Google and like Bing, right? In generative AI, you have a much, much wider field of models that are providing answers to users. To name a few, Google's Gemini powers Gemini the app, as well as Google's AI answers and every other place they try to stuff Gemini. This past week, like, hey, the Pixel 9 now has Gemini on board. Like, okay, which one? But there's like 5 different Geminis. Actually, that is true, isn't it? Gemini 1.0, which is now retired, Gemini 1.5 Pro, Gemini 1.5 Flash, Gemini 1.5 Experimental, Gemma 27B, Gemma 2 27B, Gemma 2 9B, 6 different models. No, 7 versions of Gemini. You got to measure in each one of those. GPT-4 Omni powers ChatGPT and the many, many companies that have built their infrastructure on OpenAI's platform, like HubSpot's ChatSpot, for example. Anthropic's Claude models power a variety of writing apps, as well as their own web app. Meta's Llama models, the family of Llama models, Llama 3.1, in what, 9 billion, 70 billion, and 405 billion parameters. That powers Meta AI and the AI search in all of Meta's apps, like Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and Messenger. Then there's the Mistral family of models from the French company Mistral that powers apps and services around the world, but especially in the EU. It's the EU's favorite child in the AI world. And there are many, 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 many more. You can see and test the top 89, yes, 89, in the LMSys chatbot arena. And if you wanted to measure brand strength, you'd have to test all 89. Like asking the same question over and over again to all 89 models to see how they respond. Any company or tool saying they can measure your brand's presence in AI had better be able to query at least the major models, right? Gemini and GPT-4 Omni and Anthropic Claude and Meta Llama and so on and so forth. Not to mention the tens of thousands of smaller models that are in production. IBM has the IBM Granite model and Watson X. In fact, IBM Watson X is a great example of how challenging even answering the question of AI presence can be. People who are building enterprise apps on the Watson X platform, right, which is a fantastic platform, and that the big players use tools like Watson X and IBM because of risk and management and stuff like that. If you want to influence large enterprises that are using the Watson X system, you better be able to influence each of the models that are in that system. If any company or piece of software is telling you they can measure your brand's presence in an AI model and it can return that result in less than a day, they're lying. There is no kind way to put that. They are lying. You would need to query dozens, if not hundreds, of different ways of asking a model questions about your brand, tens of thousands of different ways to ask questions about your industry or niche. We just saw the example, right? And ask those questions of at least half a dozen, if not more, models. Chatbot Arena, right? 89 models to test. Even fully automated, you are not getting an answer to a question of brand strength in AI in under a day, and certainly not for free. Like, the compute costs alone would be in the hundreds of dollars of API calls just for one model, not much less a dozen of them. Part 4, ground truth. Most generative AI services that offer consumer interfaces have started creating grounding in their software. That is, the software gets answers from the model generates answers, and then the infrastructure that hosts the model essentially fact checks the model with website data, typically from search engines. Meta's AI model does this in the Meta AI search. ChatGPT does this. Presumably SearchGPT will do this. Google's Gemini does this, which means while people may not necessarily use search engines the way they used to, or as much as they used to, optimizing your content for search engines is still vitally important. Showing up in search engines means that when an AI model is unsure about its answer, if the model has the ability to call tools like web search, it's going to ask the nearest search engine. Llama 405 is going to go, I'm not confident about this. Hey, Google, here's my queries. Here's some results. Perplexity does this, for example. Those sites and pages that do well in legacy search and traditional search will be the points of reference for AI models that are checking their own work, which is a polite way of telling you, don't fire your SEO team just yet. You're going to need them to make sure that models know where to look when they're not sure about an answer. Part 5. So what do we do? Let's get to the so what, as Katie Rivera likes to say. Okay, we effectively cannot measure our brand presence in an AI model because the architecture of the model simply makes that infeasible. But what we can do, what we know how to do, is create content on the internet that's available for models to learn from. Almost every AI company making models today uses some or all of the Common Crawl archive of public web pages as the base data for their model training. Common Crawl is a nonprofit that regularly creates and updates. It's a massive archive of text, 6.2 petabytes as of the last crawl. And it's something that you can, if you have the disk space, which is like 1,000 MacBooks, inspect yourself to see what's inside. You can download portions of it and see what part of your website has been scraped. I've done this myself because the index is much smaller than the whole archive. You can see what news outlets, what blogs, what podcasts, etc., are inside their archive by URL and by extension inside the training data for language models. We, marketers, can and should be creating high quality, high volume content everywhere we can. Make YouTube videos at scale like this one, right? We know for sure companies like NVIDIA have scraped millions of hours of YouTube video for their model training. They got a lot of hot water for that recently. I am almost 100% confident that OpenAI has scraped the same from YouTube because in their voice transcription model, Whisper, it recognizes and tags my voice in audio. It's really weird. I'll upload an audio file and it will transcribe it and it says Christopher Penn. I'm like, I didn't tell you this was me, but it recognizes me from all the scraped YouTube videos it's pulled. We should be creating content in all the places we know scrapers go and AI models go to obtain training data. GitHub, Stack Exchange, Reddit, YouTube, local news sites, Substack, various social networks. And finally, probably most important, we should be investing very heavily and building our brand like crazy. You should be building your personal brand by being in as many places as you can be feasibly. You should be publishing guest content wherever you can. You should be on every podcast that will have you. Even if it has 2 listeners, who cares? As long as it's on the public internet, ideally with a transcript. You should be joining live streams and being on any YouTube channel that'll take you. We want models to train on our names and our topics from as much text as possible, which means we need to create that text in as many places on the internet as we can. Instead of chasing inbound links like we used to in SEO, now we're just chasing placements, period. Believe it or not, This is where public relations firms and teams could make a huge difference for their companies. The best firms and teams excel at getting media placements, so their strategies has to pivot from, we want top-tier media like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times to, hey, we'll take any media we can get. East Peoria Evening News, you want us? Great, we'll be there, right? Bob's Blogspot blog, great, we'll be there. And the volume of placements is what you're going after because you want to be everywhere. So to wrap up, you cannot reasonably measure AI brand strength, right? Yes, you can. You can technically measure your brand placement in AI, but it is time intensive. It is compute intensive. It is very expensive process to do so if you do it well. Like if you want to do it well and thoroughly. If you want to do it completely wrong, it's free and easy, right? There's a bunch of tools that will give you wrong answers for free. The wrong answers. However, you can absolutely measure the impact of AI on your business using the gold standard of measurement. Asking people how they heard about you. There is no substitute for this. There never has been. And when done properly, will always be a timeless, valuable source of marketing attribution. How'd you hear about us? What made you come in today? Where did you first hear about us? If you'd like still to try measuring brand strength in AI and you feel like lighting a lot of money on fire, my company, Trust Insights, will try to talk you out of that. But we'll absolutely still take your money if you absolutely insist. But we will try very hard to talk you out of it because it is just a massive undertaking. All right, so what else happened this week? This week, I did a 5-part series. I've really been enjoying doing this, by the way. I think I may continue to do them. I did a 5-part series on a question that Mar asked, of all things, how do you avoid generative AI? And so there's 5 pieces on it, on legal and infrastructure, software, marketing, and various other considerations. So go check that out. Also did a fun live stream with John this week on how do you automate your email newsletter with generative AI? And so go check that. It was a lot of fun. And Katie and I previewed our MACON, the Marketing AI Conference. We previewed our talks that we're going to be doing at that event, which is coming up in like 3 weeks now, I think. So it's going to be very, very exciting. If you're going to be there, say hi. You'll be able to spot me easily. I'm the one wearing the crazy mask, probably. Let's see what we have for jobs this week. We have content creator at Motion Recruitment, content marketing manager at Centrical, contentful developer and YouTube content creator at Ammo Studio, director of GTM strategy at Rocked, marketing analytics manager at Guardian Dentistry Partners, morning digital producer at Straight Arrow News, partner sales manager at Amplitude, QA enablement specialist at DMPG, senior data analyst at Rocked, senior marketing research analyst at Distinguished Programs, senior Oracle developer at Steris, social media content creator for TikTok and Instagram at Adro, and tracking specialist at South Watts. So some interesting jobs there. Events coming up is going to be real busy. I have a private event in Los Angeles at the end of this month, and I have the Marketing AI Conference in Cleveland. You can use discount code PEN100 to get $100 off your ticket there. Go to macon.ai or marketingaiinstitute.com. Either way will get you there. Then I'm doing Lab Products Association in September in Philadelphia. Then Marketing Profs B2B Forum here in Boston, Social Media Marketing World, and possibly some other ones too, including one in a very interesting location, but as soon as we have the signed paperwork, I'll be able to talk about that. That is going to do it for this week's newsletter. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I hope that you found the advice about measuring AI brand strength helpful. I'll talk to you on the next one. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you want to know when new videos are available, hit the bell button to be notified as soon as new content is live.